Hi everybody, I'm Steph from Backstitch and Baste Patterns, and I'm really excited to be showing you how to make my Cosy can wrap. This is a free pattern that is available in my Facebook group, so if you don't already have the pattern, then do pop along and download that. You can find it in the files of the group, and it's got measurements for all pieces and pattern pieces as well, and a full PDF tutorial with some photos. So these are my Cosy can wraps. They're designed to fit a 330ml can of drink, and they are a great scrap buster project. They use minimal supplies, no hardware, and they're really fun to make, so I hope you enjoy them. The first thing that I've done is cut all my pattern pieces as per the measurements or the pieces that come with the pattern. So I've got two of piece A. This is my exterior and this is my lining, and these are exactly the same size, so they're both cut from piece A, and I'm just using a cotton woven for this project. You can use canvas as well, but it needs to be a non-stretch fabric for this one. This is one of my piece B's, which is the wadding that goes in the middle of the can wrap. This is actually Insulbright, which is an insulated wadding, which is designed to keep things cold or keep them warm, but you can use felt or fleece as well if you don't have this sort of stuff. You'll see that it is slightly smaller than your main exterior piece. It's cut out of the seam allowance so that you don't get bulky seams when you sew it together, and that will make sense later in the pattern. Now, because I know this is quite a thin cotton woven, because I've used this before, I've also cut myself a piece of woven interfacing just to give this piece, my exterior piece, a little bit of strength, and I've just cut that using pattern piece A, so it's exactly the same size as my exterior piece. I don't need to interface the lining, but I am going to pop that interfacing on the exterior. This is completely optional, you don't have to do this, and it will work completely fine without, but because I know this is quite thin, I'm going to interface that piece now. So we're now on step 3 of the pattern. I need to turn both my exterior and my lining pieces over, so I've got them wrong sides up, and then I need to draw a 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter line down one of the long edges on each of my pieces. Now, if you're using a directional print like I am here for my exterior, that needs to be the bottom edge. So I'm going to draw on this edge on my exterior. My lining actually doesn't matter with this one because it's not a directional print, but I'm going to draw that line down each of these edges. So I'm just using a biro for this, just so it's nice and dark so you can see it on the video, but you can use a chalk pencil or water-soluble pen or whatever you would usually use. Okay, so that's a 3/4 inch, 2 centimeter line down each of my long edges, my bottom edge on any pieces that are directional. The next thing that I need to do is I need to press this edge up to that line. So I don't want to stick it down, I don't want to fuse it or anything like that. I just want to give it a really good press with my iron, just so it holds that fold, and I get a really strong fold line, because that's going to be really useful later when I get to the final construction of my can cozy. Okay, so I've done that on both my pieces, my lining and my exterior, and that's the bottom edge of my exterior directional print. The next thing that I need to do, and this is step 5 of the pattern, is I need to put my exterior and my lining pieces right sides together. So my right sides are together, and I want to clip it along the other long edge, so the long edge that you didn't put the fold on. You can use as many clips as you like, just to hold that together. That's going to be the top of my can cozy, and now I'm going to sew along this edge using a 3/8 inch or a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I'm going to backstitch at each end just to really hold that seam nice and secure. So you can see my stitch line across here, where I've just sewn that 3/8 of an inch 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm now on step 6 of the pattern. So I'm going to open out my piece and I want to press this seam flat. I want to press it open like this, just because that helps it turn a little bit later and get a really nice finish on the top of your can cozy. So I've opened out that seam and it's sitting nice and flush on both sides. So now I'm going to move on to step 7 of the pattern, where I need to start to prepare my wadding. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to find the centre of each of the short sides on my piece of wadding, and I need to mark those. Now I like to notch mine, but you can mark them if you want to, however you would normally mark your centre points. So you can see these, I've notched these so you can see them really obviously on the video. And then I'm going to take my main piece and I want to put this piece of wadding onto my lining wrong side, so onto the long side of my lining piece, so that it sits in between my seam that I sewed at the top, where I sewed my 2 pieces together, and my fold line, not the line I drew, but the fold line that I pressed in earlier, and it should sit perfectly between those two. If you find at this point that it doesn't, either because your cutting is a little bit out or your seam allowance is a little bit out, it's not a problem. You can just trim a little bit off of your wadding piece, but it should sit perfectly in between those two, and it will leave a 3/8 of an inch gap at either side. This is going to be your seam allowance, and it's cut slightly shorter, so when we sew the can cozy together we don't get bulk in that back seam. So I want it centered with both of those flaps, both those seams open, in line with my fold at the bottom and my stitching along the top. And then I'm just going to put a couple of clips on that just to hold it in place for a minute. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're actually going to baste stitch, or stitch this to our lining to hold it in place, and we're going to do that in 3 places. So the first place that we're going to do it is in between these 2 centre markings. Now if you're like me and you find it harder to sew in a straight line unless you've got a guide, you can draw a little line on your wadding that joins those points up. You're not going to see that, that's going to be inside the can cozy, so that doesn't matter. So we're going to stitch down the middle there, and then we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters away from the edge on each side. So you don't have to draw this on, but I'm just going to draw it on just so that you can see what I mean. So 1/8 of an inch on each side, so very, very close to the edge. I'm going to do it down that side, and then we're going to do the same on this side as well. So you're going to stitch this in 3 places, and that's going to hold your wadding nicely to your lining so it doesn't wiggle about when you turn your can cozy. Okay, so you can see where I've sewn those 3 lines because I've used this dark thread. So you can see my centre line and my 2 lines 1/8 or 3 millimeters of away from each of the edges of my wadding, and you can see where my fold is on the bottom, and I've still got my flap there from my seam on the top. Okay, so now we are moving on to step 9 of the pattern. So the next thing that I need to do is fold my whole piece right sides together, so that my midpoints line up, and I'm going to put a clip on those, and I want my seam to be sitting open just to avoid it being bulky, and then so that my ends line up with my flaps open. So those flaps that I folded earlier, I want those to be open, and then the same on this end, and I'm going to clip along that edge. This is going to be the back with my can cozy, and I'm going to sew along this clipped edge, so this long edge here, with a 3/8 of an inch 1 centimetre seam allowance, and that seam allowance should sit nicely inside my wadding, so I shouldn't get any of that wadding inside my seam, so I don't get a bulky seam. And I'm going to backstitch at either end just to secure it off as well. Okay, so you can see that seam that I've just sewn across there. So now we are on step 11 of the pattern. So those folds that we folded earlier at the bottom end of both our exterior and our lining piece, we are now going to fold those back over. So it's easy to see on your exterior because we're going to fold it over to that lining piece, and then we're going to clip that in place, and we're going to do that all the way round. So you can add as many clips as you would like to hold that down. And that's just going to hold that fold in when we turn our can cozy in a moment. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with my lining. This one is going to fold over my wadding. So on that same fold line we pressed over, but it should fold nicely over your wadding. And again, I'm just going to put some clips around that just to hold that in place. Okay. So now we're on step 12, and this is where we're going to have to turn our piece so we can do our final top stitching. So when we turn this, we want our exterior print to be on the inside, so we're going to turn it wrong sides together, but we want our lining on the outside. That's because it makes it a little bit easier to top stitch because it's around. You can top stitch with your foot sat on the exterior piece in the round. It's a little bit trickier to do it the other way around, but you can do it the other way around if that is your preference. So I'm just going to turn my lining piece over until I've got a really, really nice even seam at the top. I just like to put a couple of clips on this top seam just to hold it nice and flat and steady and stop it from wriggling about when we sort the bottom out in a second. And then we've got all these clips at the bottom because we clipped both our pieces. So we just need to remove some of these clips and clip both of our folds together. So if you start by popping your centre pieces together, so your centre markings down the back seam, pop those together, and then you can just very carefully make sure that your two folds match up and just move your clips so that you are clipping both pieces together. And your lining and your exterior piece should fit perfectly, like so. I'm just going to get rid of those tails there. There we go. Okay, they should fit perfectly together. So the only thing we've got left to do now is to top stitch this, and we're going to top stitch it around the bottom, and we're going to top stitch around the top as well, using a 1/8 of an inch 3mm seam allowance. So when I'm top stitching these, I like to start on the back seam, and I'm using a slightly longer stitch length. I'm using a 3mm stitch length for my top stitching, and as you can see on here, I've got my foot kind of inside that round, which makes it nice and easy to very slowly sew that seam allowance, sew that top stitching around. and your can cozy is finished. So I'm just going to cut a couple of my little tails off here, and then I'm going to turn it all the way through so it is right sides out. So my exterior is on the outside, and hopefully you've got no ruffles, because where we basted that down, it secured that wooding nicely in place. And then all that's left to do is get yourself a can and double check your fit. And there you go, your can cozy is finished. I really hope that you enjoy this project. When you're finished, please do post a photo of your finished can cozies in the Facebook group. We love to see what you've made, so please do show off your makes.